to take a look at the Sarissa arena here that is going to be part of the Kickstarter for Blood on the Sands. Just make a careful cut there to open it. So here's the arena floor. Arena means sand. Here's the, actually, I'm just gonna pop right out of there. Normally I would just push them out, but nice and easy. All right, so that gives you an idea of the scale of the arena. Looks pretty good. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sheets and some instructions. I'm gonna start by assembling the 2 side wings to the arena. Looks like there's 2 that are identical, other than they're mirror images. It looks like these 2 sheets contain most of those pieces, if not all of those pieces. So we have a base here, and then walls facing the arena, sand, guardrails so spectators don't fall into the arena, and then some supports for the main structure, and then spectator seats there. So what I usually do when removing pieces is kind of figure out where the contact points are that keep them in place so they don't fall through, and then I try and slice those with an X-Acto. Sometimes going to both sides so that they come out a little bit more freely. You don't want to force these out typically and pop them out, especially with the more delicate pieces like the railings. Otherwise you could potentially break those. So what I'm going to do is just go through kind of piece by piece and check for some loose ones initially, and then find those contact areas where it's being held in, and kind of carefully cut those so that we can start to remove them. Oops, that one popped out by itself. That's always good when that happens. Something I didn't mention before is if you have a burr on the bottom of the tab, sometimes you want to trim that down. Some pieces will have it more than others. This kit is really nicely engineered, and there really haven't been many cases where I've had to do that. But that sometimes if you have like a remnant of the attachment point, it'll keep it from sitting flush or exactly tied against something. Again, I haven't really noticed it being a problem. On the interior of the fighting ring, you know, there might be a good idea to trim that just to get it to sit right. So at this point, I've removed all of the pieces for one of the side wings of the arena. There's a base plate and then an upper platform that will rise up. This will be the spectator area. Should be 3 seating units. 4 internal supports that separate the 2 platforms. 4 guardrails. There will be 4 pieces that are walls facing the arena. Some internal supports to keep these at 90-degree angles, and then these are to support the seating units. So these are all the parts, I believe, to complete one wing. So I'll get some wood glue and then proceed on to that step. We'll begin assembly of the side arena pieces, 2 wings, and then we'll move on to that center part. I'm going to use Gorilla Glue, wood glue. That's what I happen to have on hand. Base platform looks like this. It has spots for the support structures to be in place. So it says to glue the walls in first. I'm going to do that second, actually. I'm going to start with the supports. So we'll apply a little glue. And then you want to be mindful of this little peg here that needs to be on this outer perimeter. So don't accidentally put them that way, make sure they go that way. And that does matter on these 2 ends especially, because the right triangle support needs to go on the inside. Otherwise there won't be room for it. What am I doing? Pretty tight tolerance right there. May not be able to guide it in at an angle there. It needs to come straight down into it, basically. That'll be right there. Here, rather. Walls. Make sure these are nice and right angles. That's pretty good. all four walls. Okay. I guess you do need to be mindful of the pegs. They can't just go willy-nilly. All right. This, I did a little test fitting earlier. This part is a little finicky to try and put on, a little challenging to try and line up all of the various tabs that it needs to attach with. I'm just going to work my way over from the side, make sure things are lining up. Looks like they're all seated pretty well. So that's the main spectator platform finished. Next is the seats. So we have one that's slightly shorter. That one's the bottom tier, and then this obviously is the top. Should be 4 platform supports. I'm going to try putting all of these on the bottom support or bottom seat first. Then we'll try slotting the second one in. I think it's going to be, I think because of the curves, it's not going to be easy any particular way, but I don't know for sure. I'll make sure that's in there tight. I think it would probably be easier to put this one on both of these and then work your way around with both of these connected than trying to slide that second tier on. Once the seats are done, we will put them in place. Okay. Last element to this side is to place these on barricades. I'm going to wait. I'm going to paint these separately, I think, because I'd like to do this, even though it maybe doesn't make sense with these, to make this stone. I think it would look better if that is painted stone. So I think I'm going to leave. I probably should have left those off too, actually, but we'll call it good. So that's that one arena side. Punched out the pieces for the central arena area. It's going to be really similar to the arena side wings, with some different things happening in the center for the entrance into the arena, and then the Emperor or Magistrate's viewing box. Emperor probably isn't hanging out in an arena this small. So again, I will start with just getting these supports ready. Again, being mindful of the direction. Orientation, I should say, of the supports. These guys are tight. I think you can't force one side all the way in. You have to kind of wiggle it on together. two small walls that flank the entrance. You're going to make sure that the bottom tab is the one going into the bottom, obviously the wide tab. You want this one to be to the outside of the entrance. In each case, looks like. Like so. Okay. These are the doors to the arena. Not sure how I'm gonna treat these yet in terms of how I want them to look in the final product, but I'm gonna go ahead and put them in now. It's gonna be interesting, I think. A little goopy. Make sure you don't glue the doors. I think they're meant to spin, rotate, open. It's probably a tactic for making sure those stay in place, but I don't. Could tape them together or something maybe. Might do that. Kind of loose so that just to keep them from flopping around too much. Because these are not super easy to put on even without those little doors. So try not to force anything, apply too much pressure. Trying to wiggle. Trying to figure out which one's the lock, keeping me from putting it down in there. There we go. You might be able to actually put these doors in after the fact. I don't want to try and do that though. Okay. There we have our central platform. We'll move on to the next step, which is to place the seats. These ones are a little easier to differentiate, I think. 1, 2, and 3. These smaller ones are on the outside, these are on the inside. Like so. Still not convinced what the best way to put these on is. Try something a little different this time. I'll just go piece by piece. Actually, I think maybe I'll do the two outsides. Fairly well. I think if I was to go back and redo those wings, the two side wings to the arena, I would do it the way I just did this one. End, and then the two center pieces. This seems to be the easiest way to do that. Okay, make sure everything is tight. Oops. using a Q-tip and a toothpick to get any little too many excess blobs. All right, so that's the primary structure of the center part, and then there's a loggia area for the magistrate. Two little steps. Probably add something to this just to make them look a little more solid later. This is the back of the viewing area. This piece I think I'm going to leave off for now because I may end up putting something that kind of drapes down the side a little bit, and so it'll be easier to measure this when it's off, I think. I'm just going to put it on for now. Just test fit it. Definitely being careful to not force these little guys. Those can break pretty easy, I think. And then 2 more handrails. Those are short ones. Again, I'm just going to put these ones on because I think I'm going to paint those separately. So that's the arena entrance and viewing area. Pretty cool. Last pieces are these risers or staircases going up to the arena. There'll be 2 of those. Pretty straightforward. Base piece, top platform, wall facing the fighting arena, 2 riser supports, steps, and then a handrail. Pretty simple. There. If you want to make this even more solid, there's a little contact edge there too that might be worth adding to. The supports on the other pieces don't really seem to touch up against the walls in every instance, so it might not be worth putting glue on the edge, that outside right angle. But on these, I think it will help with stability to some extent. Again, these kits are nicely engineered. They fit really tight. And so I'm not using a whole lot of glue, you've probably noticed. I don't think it actually needs it. Steps all appear to be the same. That's a staircase done. So here's a picture of the arena viewed from above. Pretty nicely designed, easy to get to the playing pieces, the gladiators. Comes apart in those 5 side sections, and then this will come apart. So easy for storage. So let me think a little bit more on exactly how I want to modify it a little bit before I paint it, fill in these gaps and things like that. And then we will go from there. All right, with the assembly of the arena completed, I'm going to do a little cleanup and some additions just to kind of jazz it up a little bit, I think. It's a nice kit, really like it a lot. I like to, in my builds, a lot of times try to disguise the fact that it's MDF a little bit. So what I'm going to do is kind of some generic things where any of these little burrs that were contact points earlier, I like to sand those down. They kind of inhibit a close contact sometimes, and then they also, when you're painting them, especially if you're going to do any dry brushing, they'll show up. So I'm going to go through all the pieces and double check for any of those those little burrs that are contact points. Don't need to do a lot of sanding to get rid of them, but all right, so I'll go through all of that and clean up those burrs. The other thing I want to do is fill in some of the visible holes where some of the pegs are meant to go through. I'm going to use a spackling compound, like a joint compound. This is for sealing cracks in walls. I use this for a lot of things. Actually, I use it for this, but I also use it for bases. So like if I have a puddle base on a flat base, I'll use this around the sides of the figure's feet and stuff. So this is a micro spatula. It's a metal tool. I'm not quite sure where you end up getting those. I got this from like bookbinding or something like that. Bookbinding class I took many years ago, and I'm not sure what they're from. So I'm just gonna go through and any exposed holes or gaps, I'm gonna fill those in. You could use wood putty, like a wood filler. I think that's a lot of times a little more difficult to sand. This sands pretty quick and hopefully doesn't shrink too much and cause kind of a problem there. So that's the other thing I will be doing in addition to sanding off the burrs. You do want to be mindful and make sure you're not filling in a hole that you're going to use later for something, although at this point it should be pretty straightforward as far as what every hole is for. Some of these are for the railings that I'm going to be adding later after I paint them. Probably seal these seams as well. So it doesn't take long for this stuff to dry, really only an hour, 2 hours or so. I have one of these sanders here. I think I got it from Micromark. Pretty handy. Once it gets too abraded, you can just slide it along to a new place. I'm just gonna go over and you can see how easy that is to smooth down. Really pretty quick. So pretty simple, and that will disguise that join. Still not quite sure how I'm gonna handle painting this little apparatus there, the partition or canopy or whatever you want to call it. And there we have that. I've been doing a little research into Roman arenas, specifically the ones in the UK, and got a pretty good book on the one in London that was found fairly recently in the 80s. So what I'm going to do is a stone facing on the perimeter, inside perimeter, facing the sand, and then everything else will be timber, which is pretty similar to what they think the London arena looked like. I found some pieces of wood, little balsa strips and things like that that will fit pretty well in some of these gap areas. And so what I'm going to do is make this a little more substantial feeling, cover up these holes here. And then I'm still trying to decide how to handle that. I think if I wanted to put some these little decorative elements or something like that, need to figure out what the common denominator unit is between this section and this section. This is significantly smaller than this one, and then each of these is similar to this one. So I'll have to try and figure out that mathematically. Anyway, next step is just to dress that up and then figure out how to do the arena sides. All right, so I've been thinking about how I'm going to handle the walls. Originally, I was going to try and do some kind of rectangular 3D details on that. I don't think it divides up real well on these panels from that one to that one to the other ones, so that they look even. So I think I'm going to scrap that idea. What I've done is just cut some real thin, really thin cardboard, kind of like a card stock. I'm just gonna put that along this top edge to give it a little, I don't know, kind of a not a crenellation, like a molding or something. And then I'm gonna put some craft foam there to give you a little more substantial pillar, because that would have been built up there at the arena door, and then be a molding on the bottom. And I'll probably have to put a little bit out here and there and there and there. So I'll start on that. All right, so here's what I ended up with. And this, I think, is the final modification I'm going to make to this particular build. You can see I've added a little strip of cardboard, thin cardstock for a molding, and then a little bit of craft foam here, and a little bit more of the molding I had left over to create just kind of a little column embellishment. Built up the wood, of course, and I think from there I'm going to go ahead and start painting. What I'll probably do next is work on the base. I'm going to put in some glue and then sand, trying to avoid the spaces in between so that the hexes are clear for gaming purposes. All right, I'll go ahead and start painting in sand tiles. I'm gonna go ahead and lay in some glue and just make sure and even it out as much as possible. Probably a little too much glue. Start with the center, and then I'm going to do the edges because I think the edges will tend to dry a little quicker. I'm just being careful to not go over that little border zone in between the hexes because I want that to stay pretty clear. And kind of make the texture kind of irregular. Pour on a little bit of sand. let that sit for a little bit, move on to the next hexes. Probably skip every other one or something like that. So on and so forth. Might be a little tedious, probably take a little while, but it's the way I'm gonna do it. I've probably spent 20 minutes or so gluing sand, painting on the hexes and gluing sand. It's not taking quite as long as I thought. That's what I'm gonna do. I kind of do a few hexes and then collect the sand. Oops, hit my tripod. Collect the sand. It's kind of hard to see probably. The color is so similar, but hopefully you can see the grains. Do it again. So probably 20 minutes, third of the way done. Probably going to take me about an hour or so, which is okay. Just put on a podcast and go to it. All right, I think I am pretty much ready for painting. So my next step is to prime. I'll probably spray prime them and then use acrylic and craft paint and stuff like that. So this has all been glued. This probably only really took me about 45 minutes or so. I started doing 2 hexes at once, glue and then glue on 2 hexes and then sand and then scatter that off and then just continue the process. Once I got working on it, didn't really take me all that long. The other thing I've done is glued sand into the backs of these, which I will paint as dirt and grass, since most arenas seem to have been built up onto an earthwork of some sort. Anyway, nice looking little arena. Should be fun to game on. Low walls, probably easy to get to the figures when they're backed up against the wall. And I don't mind the cutaway that is on this version here. My understanding is Sarissa is producing a full version, full around arena with 2 staircase units and then a fill-in unit for the other side. Looking forward to getting this painted up. Thanks for watching.